Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and welcome to a special edition of Comic Class. This is part 2 of our look at all the new titles that have been announced for Marvel Now. I know I said that this episode would be going up yesterday, but in my defense, it's very hot outside and I don't feel like doing anything in this weather. But I'm gonna soldier through for you guys. So, let's get into it. On the last episode, I covered all the books that were going to be returning for Marvel Now, that were not going back to number 1, weren't new series, they were continuations, but today I'm going to cover the first half of all the new titles that have been announced. If you guys were able to pick up that free Marvel Now preview magazine, you'll notice that there was a checklist in there of all the books that were going to be a part of Marvel Now. And on today's episode, we're going to cover all the brand new number 1 issues that were on the left side of that checklist. Except for books that I already talked about in my video 2 weeks ago when I made a video about the Champions and the brand new Invincible Iron Man. But aside from those books, we're going to cover all the new number 1s, and if you want to see that video and see me talk about those books, go ahead, click on it right there. It's been floating next to my head for the past couple of seconds. You might have noticed it. Did you click on it? Have you seen it by now? Awesome. Let's get into these new number 1s. Okay, moving down the list in alphabetical order is Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. Okay, this was probably the biggest shocker out of any of the new number 1s to be announced. At least as far as like positive shockers go. No one was expecting Slapstick. That one really blindsided people. But we'll be covering that later. As for this one, Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. Now, this is a book that's going to be set in an alternate reality where Spider-Man and Mary Jane's marriage was never erased from continuity, they continued living together, and they even had a child, and that child now has spider powers, and they actually go out there and all 3 of them fight crime as one big crime-fighting family. It sounds like everything that I want from comics. Here's the problem. Okay, I know I should be loving this because this is exactly what I've been saying I want to see in the Peter Parker Spider-Man series for so many years now. I am still holding such a grudge over One More Day 10 years later, but okay, I'm a bit concerned about this. My first big concern is that this is set in that alternate reality. And that alternate reality wasn't exactly the same as our reality. I wanted to see Spider-Man continue to be married to Mary Jane and have a kid in this Marvel universe because I kind of like this Marvel universe. This is set in a reality where a supervillain named Regent literally killed every single other superhero out there except for Spider-Man. That's what that Renew Your Vows miniseries was all about. It was about Spider-Man after years of retirement going, you know what? Time to stand up, time to take him down. And then he and his family fought back and they took Regent down. Hooray for the Spider family. But that means that this series is going to be set in that world where all the other superheroes have been taken out. That's a little bit weird. I kind of don't want that. I kind of want it to be set in a world where all those other superheroes still exist. So yeah, I gotta admit, it kind of bums me out a little bit. And another thing that's making me kind of hesitant about this book is that it's being written by Jerry Conway. And Jerry Conway, hey, that guy has been around for a long time, and he to this day continues to put out good stuff. And he did work on Spider-Man when he was married to Mary Jane for a long time. So I was like, alright, you know what? This guy might be the right choice, but Jerry Conway is also kind of known for writing a little bit of darker stuff. Like he recently wrote the Carnage series, and I'm not a fan of Carnage in any way, and yet I still looked at that book and went, damn, this is a really good horror series. You are really nailing that tone of an old classic horror comic. But yeah, for the book that's all about the family of superheroes going out, which should have more of like a Fantastic Four vibe to it, I don't know if he's the guy I would have picked for that. But as I said, he did write Spider-Man when he was married to Mary Jane for a long time, so I was like, you know what? Maybe he will be able to get, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not counting this one as a negative. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna be a little bit hesitant about it. But something else that has me just a little bit confused about this book is that, as I said, that Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows storyline was set in an alternate reality where this brand new villain of Regent popped up and he took out all the heroes and it was up to Spider-Man and Mary Jane to work together to take him down. And in the regular Amazing Spider-Man series, which is set in the regular canon Marvel universe, the one where they were married, but then their marriage was erased from continuity and nobody remembers that ever happened. For anybody who doesn't know what I'm referencing with that, this must sound insane to you, but it is. It's nuts what they did with those two characters. But anyway, those two had to recently actually fight Regent. He did pop up in the regular Marvel Universe, and Spider-Man had to fight him alongside Mary Jane, who had to dress up in his old powered Iron Spider costume. And as the 3 of them were fighting, they all paused and went, wait a second, I feel like I feel like this has happened before. It feels like there's a fuzzy memory there that's coming back. I was like, oh my god, wait, hold up. Are you about to remember that alternate universe? Are you about to remember what happened in that alternate reality? But then they kind of did and it faded away, and it seemed like that was the start of something. Like it was the start of them going, okay, wait, maybe that alternate reality somehow has an influence on our reality. Maybe it's going to lead to the two characters getting back together. Maybe something's going on here. But now that they're announcing that this is going to be its own series, set again in that alternate reality, it kind of has me looking at it like, wait, then what the hell was that about? Then why did they almost remember this alternate reality for a second if it's just going to be its own series off there? That just feels weird to me. Don't get me wrong, very happy to see any book out there where Spider-Man is still married to Mary Jane and they have a kid. That is still an amazing thing. It's just like, there's many kind of, I don't want to say red flags, but red-ish flags popping up on this one. But I am still going to pick it up when it comes out because it's Spider-Man and Mary Jane back together. This could literally be just an awful book. I would still buy it just for that. Next up is just going to be plain old Avengers, and I am glad that it's going back to that title because I've enjoyed all new, all different Avengers, but I have had a problem with many of the Avengers books that Marvel has put out in that I don't know what technically counts as like the main Avengers team out there, because it seems like at this point anybody can just make any Avengers team that they want, and I'm not saying that none of them count except for one. It's just, as an old school comic book fan, I would really like it if there was just at least one book out there just called Avengers, so I could go, okay, that's the main team, that's the main Avengers team, and they're going to do that again. So good, okay, glad. It's still being written by Mark Waid. Like I said, I've been enjoying all new, all different Avengers, which he's been writing, so good, okay, cool. I'm glad to see that he is going to continue to be on this book, and the team is going to be Captain America, Sam Wilson, Jane Foster, Thor. It's going to be the Vision, so it's those three characters returning from the all new, all different team. It's going to be the new Wasp, who has popped up in a few issues of all new, all different Avengers. I actually really like the new Wasp. I am a big fan of the classic Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, and this new character is Hank Pym's daughter, who he had with his first wife, but Hank Pym never even knew that he had this daughter. You see, his first wife was pregnant, but she was attacked and killed by spies. At least that's what everyone thought. However, she lived just long enough to be captured by them and then still give birth to their child. That child is this new Wasp, and she was then raised by these spies, and she was actually even trained by the Winter Soldier, and she was raised in the Red Room, the same place where the Black Widow was trained, but she never like fully committed to these spies. She is not like some double agent. She is someone who grew up hearing the stories of the Avengers and of her father, Hank Pym, and of how great they were, and she was always like, I don't care what these guys are trying to teach me, I'm going to learn all their skills, but I'm going to break free one day, make it to America, and become an Avenger just like my dad was. And you know what? That's exactly what's happening. And she is such a fun character, so I'm really happy to see her join the team. And another one of the new additions is Hercules, and that is awesome, and I'll tell you why. It's because I have been a massive fan of the Dan Abnett Hercules series, the one that just launched about a year ago. However, I was pretty much alone on that because it did not sell well and it got canceled almost immediately. But one of the amazing things in that book is that Hercules had always been known for being a big party animal, being reckless, just going out there destroying stuff and just being some big braggadocious jerk. And in this book, he's not drinking, he's not sleeping around, he's being responsible, he's learning technology, and it's all because he stopped one day, looked around and went, I was a hero. I was someone that people sung songs about, people built statues of me, and now I'm a joke. And I'm a joke because I have not progressed. So he sat down and went, you know what? I'm going to actually try and mature. I'm going to try and move into the new age. And that's exactly what he's done. And it's a great story of someone trying to better themselves. And I had this big fear that because that book got canceled so quickly, that would be the end of Hercules. That basically, the next time that someone wrote him, he'd go right back to being that big braggadocious drinking jerk. But Mark Waid is the guy who really cares about continuity, and when you look at the Hercules that's appearing there, that's exactly what he looked at like in his old series. So I was like, okay, Mark Waid is going to keep him the way that he was. He's going to continue his journey to try and better himself. That's awesome. But here's the other thing that makes me really excited. The storyline in that Hercules series was all about new gods appearing. It was basically the time of Herc and all of his gods, they're done. They're gone. They are the old gods, their time has passed. Now all these new gods are popping up, and they all kind of look like creepypasta characters, which is kind of awesome. In fact, there's one guy there, the new God of War. He's basically the Slender Man. And it looked like they were planning some big, huge, epic storyline involving these characters that could one day lead to a massive, giant event. However, like I said, that series got canceled at issue 6. However, Mark Waid, again, is a guy who cares about continuity and he cares about storylines. I can tell this is going to be a story that pops up in this Avengers books, which is great because brand new gods coming up who want to destroy everything. Yeah, that's something you should call the Avengers for. So I look forward to that possibly being the storyline that pops up later on in his run. Now, the other new character that is there is an irony character, an Iron Man-ish character. It doesn't look like the new Riri Williams Iron Man. So I don't know who it could be. But, you know, every Avengers team needs an Iron Man, and I'm sure that's something that we will learn more about as Civil War goes along. But for now, the majority of this cast looks pretty darn good. Next up, speaking of Mark Waid on Avengers books, there's going to be a new series called Avengers 1.1. Now, if I had to take a guess, I'd say this is probably just going to be a mini-series, but it's still an interesting idea. Mark Waid is going to be telling us new adventures starring Cap's kooky quartet. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what that name means, that was the name given to Cap's team of Avengers after the main Avengers left, like early in the days of the Avengers. Back when Iron Man, Thor, Giant Man, and Wasp all left the team and Cap was the only one left there, and he was like, I can't just let the team fall apart. The Avengers are important, they mean something. I'm going to create a brand new team, and he created a team starring Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. And these days, those three characters are main core huge Avengers. Back then, they were super villains, and this was a crazy turn of events for Cap to bring them in. I honestly think this could be a great series, at least a great mini-series, like I said, because think about that. You are someone who got tricked into being a supervillain. The whole world hates you. You want to try and turn your life around. Suddenly, Captain America, a living legend, comes to you and goes, hey man, I'm gonna need you to replace Iron Man. That could be a great storyline because back in those days, you know, series were more about just, hey, go out, stop the villain. I think it would be amazing to go back and tell new stories featuring those characters and get inside their heads and what it's like to actually be in that situation. Next up, here's one nobody saw coming, which is ironic, Bullseye. Yes, Bullseye is going to get a series, and I gotta say, I actually really like it when they give villains series because villains need to be kind of big and intimidating, but if they're going up against heroes, they constantly have to lose. But if you give them their own series to go out and just do whatever they want and have their own adventures, suddenly not only do they become more fleshed out, but also, yeah, they become more threatening because we're now watching them win over and over again. So the idea of giving a villain its own ongoing series is interesting. And Bullseye is really interesting because most villains have like one little nugget of gold in their heart, you know, like one thing to them that you can point to and be like, alright, well, you know, that guy, he's not all bad. Bullseye is all bad. Bullseye is flat out nuts, cuckoo puffs crazy, and they're gonna give him his own book. And it's being written by Ed Brisson. And I will admit I had to look up who that guy was, but he's the guy who wrote Sheltered, and after I found that out, I was ashamed I had to look his name up because there's so many books over at Image that everybody talks about, everybody praises, everybody can't get enough of. Sheltered was that one book that nobody was talking about except for me. I was like the one champion of that book in my store, telling everybody about how good it was, and yet I didn't remember the name of the writer, so maybe I wasn't the best champion of that book, but still, I really did think that that was a great series. It was a series that was all about a group of doomsday preppers. They were a group of people who got together once a year at their special bunker to plan about what happens in case the end of days come, in case suddenly there's a zombie attack, there's a giant plague, a volcano erupts. In case the world ends, we're the ones who are going to survive, and every single year they get together to make plans. One year they get together, and they always bring their kids along. So all these kids, you know, they see each other once a year and they slowly get to know each other. But one year they get together, and one of the kids, who is basically all the worst characters in Lord of the Flies rolled into one, he reveals that he's been planning over the past year to kill all their parents because he says he knows that an apocalyptic event is going to happen and there isn't enough food here for all the kids and all the parents. So in one night, they kill off all the parents and all the kids start to run the place except for one girl who was not in on this plan, and she thinks they're nuts because, let's face it, they are nuts. and so she has to now escape from these group of crazy kids. That sounds really dark, it sounds really sinister, I know, but that was kind of the point of the book. And as I said, this guy is going to be writing the Bullseye series. Yeah, he seems like a perfect fit. This actually seems like the best guy you could have gotten for the Bullseye series, so I'm actually really excited for this. Okay, I'm going to skip around a little bit because these next two books need to be talked about side by side. Cage and Iron Fist. First off, the current Power Man and Iron Fist series is so freaking good. Oh my gosh, every issue of that thing impresses me. They just had their Civil War tie-in, and I was like, oh god, don't drag these guys into Civil War. But first off, they look at that big, giant starting event for Civil War, the thing that got the two sides to go at each other, and they actually had a very human moment in which they were just more concerned about the lives that were being lost, about the history that they had with the characters who were suffering during this event, and it just really touched them and like, oh man, you forget that these guys are actual people in this universe. Wow, it was really touching, but the thing that I love the most about it is that they went to Carol Danvers, she gave them the pitch for why they should join her side, and then as the two of them were driving off, they just went, so we're not doing that, right? And went, yeah, totally, we're not doing this. We're not getting involved in a big superhero fight again. That's total BS. We did it once, we're not doing it again. And I just wanted to stand up with a thunderous applause at that mark. Thank you, Power Man and Iron Fist. But yes, that series is so darn good. And I was so worried that it was going to get canceled in Marvel now, but not only is it not getting canceled, both the characters are getting their own series. Now, first off, the Cage series is going to be storylines from back in the 70s, back when he was, wearing the tiara and the, chain belt buckle. And it's going to be drawn and written by Genndy Tartakovsky, the brilliant genius animator behind shows like Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack, and the Hotel Transylvania movie, which was actually way better than a lot of people gave it credit for. I actually really enjoyed that movie. But Samurai Jack and Dexter's Lab, oh my god, those series looked amazing. They were so much fun. He is going to be writing and drawing this book. This is something that he has wanted to do for a long time. This was one of those famous stories from the world of comic books about a book that almost happened, but then because things kept coming up, it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed, and then eventually it just got forgotten about. He has been talking for literally a decade about wanting to write and draw a series starring Luke Cage back in those old Hero for Hire days, and now it's happening. I cannot believe that this is happening. Writing it? Sure, I could see that maybe one day happening. The fact that a guy who is such a talented animator is also going to draw this book has me so excited for it. And the other one, Iron Fists, plural. Okay, I'm a little bit torn on this one, and I'll tell you why. It's going to be written by Care Andrews. Now, Care Andrews also wrote the last Iron Fist series called Iron Fist: The Living Weapon. And one thing that I always loved about Iron Fist is that he was just kind of jokey. He was lighthearted. He was upbeat. The guy was adventurous. This book completely cast him in a darker, gritty tone. And I know that I complain about dark and gritty tones and superheroes all the time. This one put every single other thing I've ever complained about to shame. There are literally panels where he is cast in shadows talking about how he is full of rage, and every night he thinks about his mother's screams as she fell to her death, and the panels literally spell out death. They are literally just shaped like the letters death as he is sitting there thinking in them. And it's oh my god, this is huge. This is just too freaking much. And it's not the Iron Fist that I want to read about. However, it was also drawn by Care Andrews, and that dude is an insanely talented artist. And when he drew Iron Fist, going into his full-blown kung fu action, oh my god, it looks so pretty. It looks so damn good. That is one of those books that no matter how dark and depressing it got, I still wanted to read it because it just looks so darn good. But at the end of that series, he found this little girl who was the protector of the egg of the dragon that all Iron Fist get their powers from. The previous dragon was killed, and there was an egg, and that egg was going to hatch and give us the new dragon, and she was protecting it. And at the end of that series, he basically adopts the kid, and she learns how to use the Iron Fist powers, and she learns brand new abilities, and she actually can bring the old dragons back from the dead, and now she's got this little tiny pet dragon go around, and at the end of it, he's you know what, things aren't so bad, it's gonna be alright, and then he and Luke Cage give each other a fist bump, and they're yeah, alright, let's go out there and be superheroes, and it's big and upbeat, and I read that final issue, this is the Iron Fist that I wanted. Where was this guy throughout the whole series? So here is why I'm a little bit torn on this book. It's because none of that stuff I just mentioned has been referenced in any other appearances of Iron Fist, but this book is going to be written by Care Andrews, that same guy who did that previous series, and the other Iron Fist in this book is that little girl. And as you can see, they've got the little pet dragon in there. It's like, oh my god, they're bringing that back. That's awesome. That's exactly what I want. And you see Danny up there, and he's smiling and all happy. It's like, oh, that's great. But it's not going to be drawn by Care Andrews anymore. So, you know, yeah, as I said, that was the biggest appeal of that book, is that Care Andrews made it look so freaking good. But, as I said, where it left off is exactly the Iron Fist series that I wanted to read. And it looks like this is just going to continue that. So if he continues in that direction, in that positive, adventurous Iron Fist going out there training his new protege to use the Iron Fist, and they've got Pet Dragon, and they're going out there fighting other dragons that have come back to life, it's like, okay, that sounds awesome. That is totally a book that I want to read. However, if at any point he then stops and goes, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to take it back to the depressed, dark Iron Fist. Yeah, I don't know if I want to read that. So I'm very hopeful on this one, but I do see one way that it could be bad, but mostly positive on it. Fingers crossed. Next up is Captain Marvel. They are rebooting that back to issue number 1, which I wish they had kept the series going because it was still only a few issues into its run. But I understand why they're rebooting it back to issue number 1. She's one of the major players in Civil War 2, so obviously there are going to be big changes for her. They want to create a brand new jumping on point for anybody who was reading Civil War 2 who want to continue reading about her, so I understand it. And it's going to be written by Marguerite Stoll, who is a young adult author who I have never read anything by, so I can't judge her on this book at all. But, you know, good for her for getting on the book. Yeah! But as for the preview image, Marvel, this is something I've been saying for the longest time. You need to be more careful about what you put out there about the books that are coming out after your big event while the big event is still going on. You didn't need to advertise this at all. All you had to do is say Captain Marvel #1 and everybody would look at that and go, okay, she's one of the major players in Civil War 2. Something big is going to happen that causes the book to go back to issue #1. I'm definitely going to reserve that at my store. My store will definitely order enough copies of that. They go ahead and show two sides arguing about her, and one of the sides says evil tyrant, and all you gotta do is look at that and go, yeah, she's going to win Civil War, she's still going to have Ulysses telling the future, and now there's going to be people arguing about how she uses this power. Okay, yeah, again, it kind of takes some of the punch out of Civil War 2. But all I gotta say about this is that I'm really enjoying the current Captain Marvel series, and one of the things that I really enjoy about it is all the changes they have made to her character. Like, she is now the leader of Alpha Flight, which is no longer a Canadian superhero team. It's now Earth's first line of defense against anything coming from outer space, even though it still contains many of the old characters from that Canadian superhero team, including Puck. Puck is so darn good in this book, but I really love all those changes. I love her being the boss of space, basically. I love Alpha Flight being this new space team. That's all awesome, so all I have to say about this book is, please don't lose any of that. I'm sure you're going to change a lot of stuff because of Civil War 2, because Civil War 2 has to change everything, but don't change those things. Those things are really darn good. Okay, we're going to skip Champions, because as I said, I already talked about that book a few weeks ago when all this news started breaking. So the next book that we're going to talk about is The Clone Conspiracy. Now, I don't think this is an actual new series, whether mini or ongoing, definitely not ongoing. I think it's just going to be a one-shot that is the start of the next Amazing Spider-Man storyline. This is something that they have been previewing for a long time and hinting at and leading up to in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, where basically his old villain, the Jackal, is going to come back, and the Jackal was known for making clones, and he's basically going to create clones of everyone who has ever died in Spider-Man's life. It sounds crazy, but even though I have had many problems with Dan Slott's run on Amazing Spider-Man, one thing I've really enjoyed is the way he handles the Jackal. The Jackal actually popped up in a storyline called Spider Island. I love Spider Island. Spider Island, I've been reading Spider-Man my entire life. He's one of my favorite heroes. I would actually put Spider Island in my top 10 favorite Spider-Man stories. There, I said it. I loved it that much. It'd be at the bottom of that top 10 list, but I would put it in there because it was so freaking good and he handled the Jackal so well in there. So, yeah, I really look forward to that. Plus, they're going to be bringing Kane back. Kane as the Scarlet Spider is amazing. They just put all of his Scarlet Spider books up on Marvel Unlimited, so if you have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, check that book out. It was so darn good. So, yeah, even though I have problems with Dan Slott's Spider-Man series, I am looking forward to this one because I am hoping that could possibly be another Spider Island. And next up, speaking of huge, massive events, Death of X. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this. I've been meaning to talk about this issue for a while. There just hasn't been really a good time to do it, but no time like the present, because there might not be a future for these characters. It is fairly common knowledge that Disney has told Marvel to stop using their X-Men. There were some leaked memos that said not to put them in any of their advertising, and ever since then, the X-Men have been popping up in fewer and fewer things. Yeah, because Disney does not own the X-Men movie rights. They view the X-Men comics as being advertisement for their competitor. So they've been telling Marvel to downplay the X-Men and to start talking up the Inhumans a bit more, because the Inhumans they view as being a substitute for the X-Men that Disney does own. And there is no greater metaphor for that in the actual Marvel comics than the fact that the Terrigen Mist, the thing going around the planet, turning people into Inhumans, is poisonous to mutants and makes them sterile so there can never be any more mutants created, and it also slowly kills them. And this storyline is going to be all about how Cyclops challenged Medusa and he ended up dying, and he did something that made the entire world hate mutants all over again. By the way, I'd like to point out that the moment that I started talking about the fate of the X-Men, it started raining and thundering outside. I swear to you that's true. This is a sign. But okay, this is something that happened during that 8-month time skip between the end of Secret Wars and the start of the all-new, all-different Marvel line, in which they said that during that time, Cyclops challenged the Inhumans and he died, and this is going to be the story of what happened to him. Now, it really frustrated me that such a big, important character died off-screen, so I'm glad that this was all planned and they were going to reveal it to us later, but listen, I can't get excited for something that's just going to further the end of the X-Men. And the sad thing is, there is a whole new generation of comic book fans out there that do not understand the importance of the X-Men, don't understand what it means to people, because they started reading comics after Marvel went, yeah, push them to the side. Just get them out of the way and start talking about the Inhumans. And I'm not saying the Inhumans are bad. There are many great Inhuman characters, and I really enjoy a lot of the old Inhuman stuff. Back before they tried to make them a little bit more like the X-Men, there were great storylines in there. And as I said, I enjoy so many of the new Inhuman characters who have been created, but it's really hard for me to look at them and applaud them when I still look at them like, yeah, you're the thing that's ending the X-Men right now. And there's a part of me that looks at this and just really hopes that Marvel is trolling us, because Marvel is the best at trolling its audience. There have been so many times in which Marvel's like, oh, this thing is definitely going to happen. Yeah, that definitely looks like it's really what happened, didn't it? Well, that's totally it. We've been planning this all along. And then they come out like a week later and just go, did you guys actually believe that? Oh, we totally got you. So I'm really hoping that after that memo got leaked from Disney saying, hey man, downplay the X-Men, I'm really hoping that Disney then came in and went, you know what, it's fine, whatever, we don't care. And Marvel's like, hold on, we can make this into something. We can make this a storyline that lasts for years, and then a couple of years from now, we have a huge explosion of X-Men comics all over again. But man, that isn't what it looks like. In fact, if you've been reading the current Extraordinary X-Men series being written by Jeff Lemire, it is very clear at certain moments in that book that Jeff Lemire is calling out for help. There was one moment in that book where Storm was in her office by herself and just pondering to herself the fate of the X-Men and whether or not the X-Men could survive past the Terrigen Mist and all the stuff with the Inhumans. And he actually had Storm say, will my X-Men be remembered as the team that saved all of mutant kind? Or will we simply be the team that was here when it all ended? And I was like, that's not Storm, that's Jeff Lemire saying that. Jeff Lemire is asking if his X-Men book will be the one that saves them all, or if it was just the last X-Men book. So yeah, it's a much more complicated issue than that. I'm going to get into it more later in another video, but for now, I'm glad that we're finding out the fate of Scott Summers, and hopefully this will get people to pay a little bit more attention to the X-Men and maybe get their sales up, but yeah man, it's not looking good for the X-Men right now. It really isn't. Next up is Doctor Strange and the Sorcerers Supreme. Now this book, when I first heard about it, got me really excited about it. But that's because if you've been reading the current Doctor Strange series, they've been introducing magic users from all over the planet, and all of them are big and crazy and have super elaborate backstories. They really thought every single one of these characters out. Like, there's one character in there who is a monk who wears a Dr. Doom mask, and he is one of the monks that trained Dr. Doom, and when Dr. Doom rose up and killed all those people who trained him, he was the one that survived, and he was like, I created great evil. I will go out there on a mission of peace to try and do as much good as he does bad. I'm like, that's an awesome character. That is so cool. And there are so many other characters like that, who they just created these big personalities and backstories for. So when I read Doctor Strange and the Sorcerer Supreme, I was like, that's gonna be them. It's gonna be Doctor Strange and that team of other magic users. This is gonna be awesome. No, that is not what it is at all. It is all the previous Sorcerer Supremes time traveling to the present, and them and Doctor Strange are out on mission. By the way, I'm sorry if I'm stuttering, but as I said, it's like 90 degrees and I am so dry right now. Better. And don't get me wrong, that's a very interesting idea. I just kind of wanted that other idea that I imagined in my head a bit more. It happens to all of us. We've all at one point in time come up with a book in our head that we would rather see. This is just that time that happened to me. But it's going to be written by Robbie Thompson, who's the guy who's been writing Silk. The Silk book is so damn good. That book is amazing. He also wrote Venom Space Knight, and I'll admit, the first couple issues of that, I was like, I don't know about this. I'm just not feeling it, but for some weird reason I stuck with it, and I'm glad that I did, because after about like 3 or 4 issues, it suddenly got really good. I really started to enjoy that series, so you know what? I've got some faith in Robbie Thompson. Next up is Fool Killer, but I'm going to save Fool Killer for the next episode because I want to talk about it solo and Slapstick all together, so we're going to instead move right on to Gamora. Now, speaking of those books out there that were rumored about existing but got delayed and delayed and delayed and you thought someone eventually just forgot about, this is a book that was announced 2 years ago. 2 years ago! And they said it was going to be written by the co-writer of the actual Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but because movies pay way better than comics, she was like, yeah, I'll get to that when I, am done writing the next movie. But she's done writing it now. She can finally actually concentrate on this book, and it's going to happen. It's actually going to come out. That's huge. The fact that they're actually getting someone who wrote that big, giant movie that everybody loved to come in here and write a book starring Gamora, that is awesome in and of itself. But also, out of all the characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy, Gamora to me is the one who really should have her own book the most. But I've been saying for years that Gamora needs her own series. She's the daughter of Thanos, the most skilled fighter in the galaxy, used to possess one of the Infinity Stones. Yeah, this is an amazing character. You need her own series to totally flesh her out. So I'm really hoping that this book will live up to what a great character she is. Next is Great Lake Avengers, but I already talked about it in that video a few weeks ago, so we're going to skip that one for now and move on to the next one, which is Hawkeye. Now, this is going to be written by Kelly Thompson, and Kelly Thompson has worked very closely with Kelly Sue DeConnick, and I like Kelly Sue DeConnick, so by the property of connecting authors, that means that I will like Kelly Thompson as well. I think that's how that works. But the previous Hawkeye series starred both Hawkeyes, Clint Barton and Kate Bishop, but this book is just going to star Kate Bishop, and I am totally fine with that because I am a huge fan of Clint Barton. Yes, when I was a kid, Clint Barton's Hawkeye was one of my favorite heroes. He was like that hero who I always kept talking about how cool he was, and everybody looked at me like, who? Who the heck are you? What? Who's Hawkeye? Green Arrow, you mean? We know Green Arrow. No, I loved Clint Barton's Hawkeye throughout my entire life. He's been one of my favorite comic book characters, and I'm glad that he is no longer in the Hawkeye book for 2 reasons. One is because after the events of Civil War II issue number 3, I kind of need some space from Hawkeye. I kind of need some space from Clint Barton, because after what he did in that issue, I mentioned this in my discussion about that issue, but I can't really look at his character the same way again. What happened in that issue is a very damaging thing to his character. I just can't really look at him and feel the way that I used to about him. But the other reason why I'm glad that he's not in the Hawkeye book is because Clint Barton, he was a smart aleck. He was a wise ass, but he was also incredibly good at what he did. That was the thing that kind of defined him, is that he was the best there was at what he did, even before Wolverine was that. So I always loved that character for that, but in the Hawkeye series, he was a bumbling idiot. He was a complete moron, and at first I enjoyed that. At first I was like, oh, it's showing that, he is a screw-up, and it's like, alright, with his attitude and the way that he approaches life, I can totally see that being that character. But he just kept getting dumber and dumber until there came one issue where he didn't know how to tie a knot on his sweatpants so he couldn't keep his pants up. And I was like, you're a carny. You're a freaking carny. Literally the first thing they teach you when you become a carny is how to tie knots. It's the first thing that happens. It just, like, that was my breaking point on that book. It really was. In which I was like, you made him too freaking dumb. And then when Jeff Lemire took over the book, he wasn't as dumb, but he still constantly just always made the wrong decision. Always made the wrong play. He constantly was still just screwing things up. And I was like, okay, if that is how Clint Barton is going to forever be represented in this Hawkeye book, just take him out of the Hawkeye book and make it the Kate Bishop book. And I do like Kate Bishop. I do not want to make it seem like I'm glad that this is starring Kate Bishop simply because it's not starring Clint Barton. Kate Bishop is a great character. She is a character that means so much to a huge audience, and I am so glad that she has finally gained her own book. But at the same time, I'm also glad that Clint Barton might finally be able to be in another book where he gets to be cool again. Next up, I already talked about the brand new Iron Man who will be starring in Invincible Iron Man. Again, it was in that episode that I made a few weeks ago. But there's another Iron Man book out there, Infamous Iron Man. And the moment I heard that title and I saw that Divided We Stand promo art that showed Dr. Doom standing there holding Iron Man's helmet, I was like, it's going to be Dr. Doom. And sure enough, it is Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is going to have his own book called Infamous Iron Man, and it's going to be written by Brian Michael Bendis, and you guys all know how I feel about Brian Michael Bendis. I'm kind of looking forward to this book. I am. I gotta admit that. And yes, as I said, I am not a fan of Brian Michael Bendis, but I'm not a fan of him for a couple of reasons, and this book looks like it's going to avoid many of those reasons. First off, he always has characters speak exactly the same way. Like, there are so many just Bendisisms that you can see in people's speech. Dr. Doom is a character who would never speak like that, and so far he's been appearing in the current Invincible Iron Man series, which is also written by Bendis, and Bendis has not been writing him like that. In fact, I kind of enjoy the way that Bendis has been writing him, because after Secret Wars, Dr. Doom had to face reality that Reed Richards actually is better than him. Dr. Doom had all the powers of a god, and he still couldn't fix his face, he couldn't recreate the universe, he was still kind of like, he just kept tripping over his own cape. Like, he was just so arrogant that he could not use that power well. Reed Richards finally berated him to the point where he had to admit, fine, yes, you could be a better god than me, and that's why I have to kill you. And then Reed took all the god powers from him, remade the entire multiverse, and fixed Doom's face, the one thing that Doom couldn't do. And the moment that happened, Doom just looked at it all and went, oh my god, I've been humbled. I, Dr. Doom, who thought he was the greatest man in the universe, realize I'm not. There are better people out there than me, and maybe me going around ruling an entire nation like a dictator, not the best way to kind of change the world for the positive. So throughout the Invincible Iron Man series, he's just been popping up every now and again, using more of his magic than his technology, because that's the other thing you have to remember about Dr. Doom. He's the second most powerful magician on the planet, and when the first most powerful was Doctor Strange, that's still pretty darn good. So he's been using more magic than technology, and trying to get more in touch with himself. But he's also just been popping up, kind of like giving Iron Man like mysterious hints and tips every now and again. Like, he's become that shadowy figure who is just assisting Iron Man with his own mysterious motivations. And I've really been enjoying that. So if he's going to be the star of this new Infamous Iron Man book, and Bendis is going to continue to write him the same way, I'm kind of excited about that. And the other reason I'm excited about it is because one of the other things that I really dislike about Bendis is that every single thing he writes must go in and completely change everything. And in all honesty, the best stuff that he writes is the stuff that is more just character studies. And this is Dr. Doom. It's going to have to be a character study book. And also, he's doing stuff from the shadows. I'm not saying he won't affect everything, but it's not going to lead to a massive, giant crossover event. He's doing everything in secret. He can't go out there and cause a giant event. So yeah, it looks like this is more up Bendis' wheelhouse. And speaking of things that are up Bendis' wheelhouse, Jessica Jones is finally getting a book again, and it is going to be written by Bendis again. Now, this is one of the first things that Bendis wrote. One of those things that he wrote that everybody looked at and went, oh my god, that's huge. And when he wrote it, it was under Marvel's Max title, which was their adult books. And this is going to be part of the regular Marvel universe, so it's not going to be quite as extreme as that old series was. But again, as I said, Bendis does character studies very well. He does the stuff that isn't team books. It's just focusing on one character and their life as they try to live it, and it's not leading up to some big thing. It's just a small storyline that focuses around them. That's what Jessica Jones is. Again, this is a book where he is going to be forced to just write about that one character. He cannot have Jessica Jones lead into Civil War 3. It is just going to be a character study on her, so okay, good. I just applauded 2 upcoming Bendis books. Please don't prove me wrong on this one. And the last book that we are going to talk about today is Kingpin. Again, giving a book to a villain. Bullseye, I would have had a hard time seeing you give him a book. I never would have guessed Kingpin. Because Kingpin, yeah, he doesn't really go out there and do things. He is more of a schemer, and you don't typically give books to schemers because that's a lot of sitting around and talking rather than action, and comics do tend to favor people going out there and actually doing action. But yeah, this actually could be an amazing series. I do really enjoy that with books like Vision, Marvel has been going more for the intellectual books rather than just big superheroes punching each other. So if this can be another book like that, that's amazing. You know, if this can basically be the Sopranos of the Marvel Universe, I am all for that. And it's being written by Matthew Rosenberg, and a lot of people might not have heard of him. He is up and coming. He has written a couple of things for a company called Black Mass, and Black Mass focuses on a lot of darker books. So A, good thing they're putting him on Kingpin. But B, the 2 books that he's written for them that's gotten a lot of people talking is his current book, 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, which he describes as a crime comedy. And I've read it and it actually is pretty darn good. But the book that he wrote right before that was a book called We Can Never Go Home. That book blew people away, including myself. I was not expecting to like that book at all because it was about this kid who meets another kid at his school, and she has powers and he's got a crush on her, but they're both like, oh god, we gotta leave home, no one understands us. And it just felt to me like, oh god, this is just so much like angst crap that I am just not a fan of. I read it, oh my gosh, it is so good. Yeah, it's tons of angst crap, but it's really damn good angst crap. He knows how to write that. I don't even feel good saying the word crap in this because it is a really stellar series. And the protagonist in We Can Never Go Home was this kid who, he was a little bit disturbed. He was going down a bad path. He had kind of a dark history. And when I thought about that, and then I thought about Kingpin's origin and all the stuff that he went through and the path that he went down, and especially like the origin that we saw for him in that Daredevil Netflix series that was so freaking good. Yeah, this guy is a perfect fit for this book. He is a perfect fit for this character. Again, another book that I never would have expected to see on this list, and yet I'm totally excited for it because they got just the right guy to write this series. Actually, just the right guy would have been Ed Brubaker, but let's be honest, he burned that Marvel bridge a long time ago. So aside from him, Matthew Rosenberg is just the right guy to write this book. And hey, you know, he's still new. He could one day become a huge talent. That's it for today's episode, everyone. Thanks for watching, and make sure that you come back on Wednesday, because on Wednesday we're going to have our final episode talking about all the remaining new #1s that have been announced. And in case you missed the previous episodes where we talked about all the returning series and those other books that I mentioned that we covered 2 weeks ago, I'm going to put them at the end of this video. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, then make sure that you hit subscribe and that you share it all around the web, because we are so close to hitting 10,000 subs. That is huge, and I thank every single person who has been supporting this channel. It means so much to me. And again, sorry for my hoarse voice today, but we were in the middle of a heat wave, and this was the best that I could do. But again, thank you guys for watching. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy, and come back next time. Bye!